Ladies and gentlemen, councillors, the time is now 10:05, so I suggest we get started. Welcome to everybody here on the 4th of October for the Highways and Transport Committee meeting. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who have joined us today for this meeting of the Highways and Transport Committee. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everybody turns their phone to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed, as I'm sure you're all aware, and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There is no fire alarm scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please do leave the building by the nearest marked fire exit and assemble at the rear of the building by the lunch area. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Would the Democratic Services Manager please report any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Received apologies from Councillor Derek Giles, and Councillor Thomas Anderson is substituting for him, and also Councillor Mandy Smith.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or non-statutory disposable interests? No, thank you very much. Okay, Chair, we are being asked to approve the minutes of the Highways and Transport Committee from our meeting on the 13th of September 2022 as an accurate record. Does any member not agree? And if you do not agree, please raise your hands now. No. Brilliant. Okay. I see no objections to the proposal to approve the minutes as an accurate record. So I'll take that carried unanimously. Can I ask, item 3 is petitions and public questions. We've received several requests to speak, and I propose that we take them under the relevant agenda item. And item 4 on the agenda is the traffic management act. Oh, sorry, the action log. Thank you, Dan. We are being asked to note the updated action log. Members, you have in front of you the updated action log, a copy of which has also been placed on the website. Can I ask members if they have any questions on its comments? There we go. You are right, Dan. Don't let me forget. So I've got Councillor Maguire, then Councillor King, and nearly got away with it.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted clarification on item 98 on page 16, is it? I think it's page 16, where it makes reference to the finance monitoring report and the LED replacement work. Can I just get clarification? I know that one of our officers is here, at least can possibly answer. It says, for clarity, there's currently no LED replacement work taking place in Cambridgeshire. And I'm presuming that means that as far as the Balfour Beatty project, the PFI project from many years ago, is effectively complete, and we've replaced all the normal lights with the LED one. Because the reason I raise it is that at a later item, when we come to do the finance report, budget report, it crops up again. So I was just seeking clarification when it says it's complete. We've now effectively replaced all the old type lamps with the LED ones.
I ask Emma, do you want to come and answer that one for us?
The initial LED replacement programme for circa 3,500 units upgrade was complete. The street lighting PFI CIP process has upgraded all the units, but not currently all to LED. Therefore, we are proposing later on in the committee if we're going to roll out further LEDs, but that will be a decision for the committee.
Thank you for that. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to express my thanks to the officers for picking up some of these long-standing items from the action log. And I did receive an email, as we all did, from Daniel about the overhanging vegetation issue. I have some concerns about that, and I would just like to ask that I may be allowed to feed in when this is discussed within the Highways Improvement Board.
Thank you, Councillor King. And I think John Munslow has responded to your email where you raised your concerns. And yes, we can involve you in the review of how we take forward that charging for.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you. Just a question going back to the LEDs to ask whether there is any prospect in an LED replacement programme of somehow engaging and supporting parishes in that, where the cost of replacing their own street lighting with LEDs is extortionate. I don't know whether there's any funding programs available for that, or any ways in which we can offer things at scale to them as part of future programs, but I think that might be helpful.
That definitely sounds like a very sensible idea. Should we cover that in the debate about the LED program when it comes later on, though? Because I think that is a very valid point and probably merits further discussion. Brilliant. Do we have any other members on the action log? No. Okay, brilliant. So let's move on to item 4 then, which is the Traffic Management Act Part 6. Application to the Department of Transport. Sonia Hansen will take us through that report. So Sonia, over to you when you're ready.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. This report is seeking approval to apply to the Secretary of State for Transport for the powers to enforce moving traffic offences in Cambridge City. When applying for powers, we have to set out an initial site to enforce, and this has been chosen as the banned left turn from Downing Street into St Andrew Street in Cambridge. Further sites could be added at a later time. The 6-week consultation is currently underway and responses are coming in. The results of the consultation will be considered by the Director of Highways and Transport in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair of this committee. And then if they agree to go ahead, the application will be submitted to the Department of Transport before the deadline. We were updated on the 28th of September by DFT that the deadline for submissions has been moved to the 13th of January, with orders likely to be laid before Parliament in June 23, with the aim that the statutory instrument will go live in July next year. So this does give us a little bit longer to consider the results of the consultation. It should be noted this is just for Cambridge City, as we can only apply where there are already civil enforcement powers.
Thank you very much, Sonia. So we have received public questions on this, and we have received comments from CamCycle, represented today by Anna Williams. Anna, thank you very much for coming. Would you like to come in and raise your questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, members, for having us. I'm speaking today on behalf of CamCycle, and it's only over 1,600 members across Cambridgeshire. CamCycle strongly welcomes the County Council's application to the Department for Transport for powers under the Traffic Management Act Part 6. We've been campaigning for these powers for nearly 2 decades. They will make a huge difference to cycling safety and help create new routes and schemes that enable more people to choose walking and cycling. We agree with the area chosen for initial implementation because Downing Street has long been an area of concern for us in regards to dangerous driving and parking. Will the ANPR camera be positioned to capture the first part of the contra-vote cycle lane, as well as the junction itself, to include enforcement of drivers entering the lane to park illegally? We're also interested in the role these powers can play in developing low traffic neighbourhood schemes, including school streets, HGV restrictions through villages, and modal filters, such as new proposals for a bus gate scheme on Mill Road. Given that it's estimated that designation orders won't be issued until April, May, and now I think we've said later in the summer, how will this affect progress on Mill Road and other schemes that may need a tailored list of exemptions? And finally, what's the latest on civil parking enforcement for South Cambridgeshire, Huntingdonshire and Fenland? When would they be able to apply for and benefit from these new powers? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me hand over to David Allett, our Assistant Director.
Thank you. So three points there. The first one, the ANPR camera will be positioned to enforce the moving traffic offence for the banned left turn, and not for entering the cycle lane for parking illegally. Parking in the cycle lane will be enforced in the usual manner. Regarding Mill Road will be enforced as a bus gate using existing powers. So it does not need this specific moving traffic enforcement application to progress it. So there should be no impact on timescales there. We already have the statutory instrument that we need in place for enforcing bus gates. Regarding civil parking enforcement, we'll be bringing an update to this committee in December regarding CPE. When CPE is implemented in those districts, then an application for moving traffic enforcement to the DFT can follow.
Thank you very much, David. Right, members, we now move to any comments and the debate. Would anyone like to start me off? Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair. Just wondered, the left turn, will blue badge holders, if they register their registration, be able to get through?
That's a good question. I think I'd have to check the exemptions of the order and come back to you on that point.
Thank you, Sonia. Does anybody else want to raise any questions or have any comments? Councillor King.
It's not really a question, Chair, it's just a comment that I very much welcome this proposal, and I think we all ought to support it. And I also have to say, I think it's rather sad that this is yet another area where we are being asked to pick up the pieces that the police no longer are prepared to enforce. And that's sad, and it's not the way it should be, because it involves extra costs to us, I'm sure. And but we need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, yes, we support this. Just touching on what Hannah was saying, obviously, this is purely in Cambridge at the moment, and looking forward to receiving the paper on CPE, because I've certainly still got concerns about the level playing field of CPE around the county. Thank you.
Definitely, Councillor Sharp. I am very much looking forward to CPE in other areas so we can start to bring forward these measures, because it is not just Cambridge that they are needed in. Councillor Maguire.
Chairman, I wasn't expecting to raise this, but because it pertains to what's already been said, we're applying for this because within Cambridge, where we've already got CPE, is because the county council actually manages the process. Right? If for the other districts are looking to have CPE, but they may not contract with the county council subsequently, because at the moment the county council applies to the Department of Transport for permission to have CPE in the other districts. Am I right in assuming that if the other districts who are eventually get CPE choose a different enforcement agency, I'll call it that for the benefit, that this would not apply to them? We're doing this because we are effectively the enforcement agency for the city. Am I right in that assumption? Does that make sense?
Well, I'll hand over to Sonia on that one, but yes.
Through the Chairman, it would be retained by ourselves. It wouldn't be we wouldn't be passing it as an agency to the district council, so we could do civil enforcement of moving traffic in the districts. Once they've got CP, we could apply for it, and then we could enforce that.
I can come back on that, Chairman.
Just to pick up, it's enforced separately.
If take for instance here in Huntingdonshire, the CP is granted, effectively the district takes responsibility for that. They don't have to contract to the county council to act as their agency. They can do it themselves or employ somebody else. So I'm not quite sure in my own mind how the county council then gets involved with this particular traffic regulation, this particular thing, because it's a different. Do you understand the point I'm making? There's a separation between this county council applying to the government for CPE, to grant CPE to the other districts, and the county council actually eventually acting as the agent as they do in the city. Yeah.
Yeah, further clarification. Yes, I understand your point. We would be clarifying that in the agency agreement with the districts. My understanding is at the moment we're looking at, we would retain that within the county. So we would be the ones that would go in and enforce the moving traffic offences. But we could have a separate discussion. I can explain a bit more to you outside committee about how it would work.
Yeah, just to clarify personally, I believe that they are held very separately. Obviously, the people enforcing parking on the ground are not necessarily the same people looking at the cameras and enforcing the moving traffic offences. So they can be dealt with separately. And for us, it will be the county councils that's enforcing the moving traffic offences. Do I have any? Councillor Sharp.
Back in there. I couldn't quite hear all of that, Sonia, because you're very faint. But certainly, I think it's something we need to look at around CPE. Just to clarify exactly what happens.
So I'm going to ask Sonia for clarifications, but I believe we'll have to make a separate application for TMA Part 6 for those areas once they have civil parking enforcement. Am I right there, Sonia?
Yes, that's correct. It wouldn't be part of the applications to DFT for the civil parking powers. We would have to subsequently make a separate application to the Secretary of State for Traffic Management Act Part 6, moving traffic offences enforcement.
So members, we can look forward to, after CPE has been rolled out in those other areas, further papers coming on TMA Part 6 for those areas as well. Thank you very much. Do we have any other comments or questions or debate? No? Brilliant. Okay, so the committee is being asked to authorise Cambridgeshire County Council to make an application to the Department of Transport for powers under the Traffic Management Act Part 6 to improve safety and tackle congestion by enforcing moving traffic offences, and to B, delegate the authority to the Director of Highways and Transport in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Highways and Transport Committee to determine any objections to the public consultation and apply to the Department of Transport for powers under Traffic Management Act Part 6. Can I take that by affirmation? Brilliant. Thank you very much. Let's move on. So item 5 on the agenda is the Local Highways Improvement Member Working Group report, and Josh Rutherford will be taking us through that. Josh, over to you.
Morning all. So this report is regarding reporting on changes to the existing LHI process. Background wise, at the April committee, it was agreed that there would be a review of the existing LHI process. A member working group would be set up. There were concerns raised about efficiency and the general programme delivery. Member working groups were set up through July and August, and they reviewed the process end to end over 6 meetings, focusing on a different part of the process every week. Key changes. So one of the changes is to a two-tiered kind of application process for complex and non-complex schemes. Some of the non-complex, for example, would be kind of signs and lines or passive traffic calming. Some of the more complex schemes would be speed cushions or other physical features. Alterations to the maximum CCC contribution, depending on the type of application. So complex or non-complex. Complex, the budget would be increased to 25,000 from the 15,000 at the moment. For non-complex, the budget would be reduced to 10,000 per application. Delegation to officers to score the non-complex applications, but with oversight from a member working group. And then changes to the existing application process, so taking it completely online. With regards to kind of next steps and timeline, so the 31st of October is the live date for applications. The website and guidance will be updated for the same date, if not sooner. The paper has been shared with applicants via email to make them aware of the upcoming changes, but making them aware at the moment that it is proposed changes rather than approved. Following committee, further communication and updates with applicants is planned. So really the recommendations, I suppose, are to review the list below in item 2.1, approve the list of recommendations and time for implementation prior to the next round of LHI applications, and also approve the reformation of the member working group to review the first round of non-complex scheme scores once the prioritisation process has been undertaken by officers, and to review the revised LHI process as and when needed once the next round of applications has been approved by committee. I think one of the key things to highlight at this stage is we accept there are probably further changes that do need to be made to the process. So this is the first step, with a commitment to review further in due course, obviously once we've trialled them.
Thank you very much, Josh. So we've received comments from CamCycle, or questions from CamCycle again. So let me hand over to Anna Williams again to ask her questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. CamCycle welcomes the review of the local highway improvement process, and we thank members and officers for all the time and work they put in. It is an important way that local communities across the county can work together for better streets. Given the discussion at the last Highways and Transport Committee about what the committee's remit was and the shift towards greater monitoring and enabling of active travel, could we ask the committee what they see as the key benefits of individual LHI schemes? What will the first KPI mentioned in the table, a cyclic qualitative survey distributed to applicants upon completion of the programme, actually measure? Will it just look at satisfaction of the applicant, or will there be monitoring of aspects such as improved safety and uptake in active travel, for example, in the case of an active travel scheme? In the section looking at alignment with corporate priorities, the opportunity to improve low carbon transport is ranked as neutral and air pollution is ranked as negative, when in fact most schemes that reduce speed improve both. We'd also like to ask what processes are in place to ensure a consistent delivery across the county. For example, ensuring that all active travel schemes are designed and implemented in line with LTN 120. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Over to David Owlett.
Thanks, Anna. The LHI process is a bottom-up initiative which allows third parties to request improvements to the highway which wouldn't ordinarily receive funding. This allows local issues to be addressed, with these being requested by the individuals who experience or are impacted by them the most. The survey will monitor satisfaction with the LHI process and allow applicants the opportunity to feedback constructively. The survey will be qualitative rather than quantitative, but it will seek to find out if the applicant feels that the LHI has addressed the issue or problem identified at the application stage. This could include improving safety or encouraging further active travel. And when designing schemes, the relevant design guidance, where applicable, is utilised, whether that be LTN 120 or similar, depending on the type of scheme.
Thank you very much, David. So I just want to start by saying thank you to everyone that took part in this LHI working group. I think it was incredibly productive, and it was good to see members from all sides really engaging. The LHI programme is obviously very important to our communities in the way that it enables them to have a bottom-up approach to highways in their area. I think the changes here have been very well thought out, and hopefully will be successful in enabling smaller schemes to be able to progress more quickly, and to enable things to be scored in line with our JA priorities and with the way that we can look to try and improve local areas. So thank you to everyone that took part in it. I'm going to open up now to any questions and debate. I know a number of us in this room were on the working group, but does anybody want to start me off with any questions or comments on it? Councillor Coote, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I just thought I would like to comment. I happened to be at the Ely City Council Environment Committee meeting yesterday when they were considering these proposals. I'd like to say that they welcomed the changes that were being made. The LHI scheme has been an excellent scheme, but frustration has built over the years, and that was what I was getting back from that group, such that actually Ely didn't last year make any applications for this because they'd been unsuccessful and put a lot of work in. There was a feeling that this review should have addressed some of these issues, and they welcomed the changes. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coote. Councillor McDonald.
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to all of you on the member working group. I think together with Josh and the officer team done a very good job. Just a bit of information which, Josh, I probably should know. But when we look at the non-complex and complex, relatively, how many schemes are we talking about in a typical year?
Well, total applications, it was roughly 170. Of those, around 65% were non-complex, with the remainder being complex. How we've looked at it in this first year is we've essentially split the budget down the middle per district for non-complex and complex applications. And again, there's flexibility to kind of review it going forward as well, dependent on the quantity of each that we receive.
Thank you very much. I think that is an important point, that as this process beds in, we are going to have to make sure that we keep an eye on the budgets and the way that it is being split. Do I have any other? Councillor G.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say I welcome this review. I think it's I wouldn't say long overdue, but the LHI has been relatively successful over its term, and I think the review has come up with a good programme going forward. I mean, when it first came along, it was mostly very small, what would we now call non-complex issues, and the more complex ones have come in there, and I've found this slightly muddied the water. So, which is where I think, for example, my colleague opposite with Ely City Council found frustrations. Things didn't fit in because they were in this complex area. I had a few myself where it was go, and then it was suddenly complex and fell out, whereas this can now pick that up. So I welcome the changes, and I think the fact that the officers mentioned, they'll be monitored and working on going forward to make sure it works, can only be a step in the right direction. So well done, everyone, in bringing it forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor G. Do I have anybody else? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Josh for the work he and his team did on the working group, because there was a lot of preparation agendas to present to the working group. So certainly thank you for that. Obviously, yes, in support of this, just want to touch on a couple of things. I agree with what Hannah was saying from CamCycle about need for it to be linked into active travel and LTN 1. Sorry.
So carry on, Councillor Sharp. The light is coming through.
Okay. Yeah. I agree that it should be linked into LTN 1, but the issue we have, I represent 11 parishes, which rural parishes, and I have speeding issues in all 11 of those, which obviously, and they're all different because of the layout of the villages are different. And yes, it's great to get active travel in there, but four of my parishes were successful with bids, and all of those were around trying to actually reduce speed of traffic, which I know helps active travel, but it's the major priority in the villages certainly is getting speed reduced through the actual high streets of the villages, or getting buffer zones, 40-mile-an-hour buffer zones in. So I understand totally the point, but we have a different issue out in the rural. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is certainly in the feedback I've seen to the recommendations is certainly there's one parish council that's got 3 parishes within its parish council. So I think that they feel that perhaps they should be able to have more than one application rather than limited to that. But I think that's something we can look at and review amongst the working group. But I think we're then sort of tinkering with the edges rather than looking at the whole substantive item of it, which I agree with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sharp. And I think on your point about active travel, that the scoring criteria has captured that very well, that it allows us to really score highly active travel schemes under safety criteria and safety for non-motorised users, while also allowing places where that isn't such a requirement to also be able to get a look in, as it were. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just echo the thanks that have been made to the officers and the members of the working party. It was a very happy experience for me being on the working group, and I also think it's just worth recording our thanks to Councillor Beckett, who chaired it very inclusively. So it was a good thing. I think we must not lose sight that it needs to be reviewed in the light of experience next year. And one of the things that Councillor Sharp has been raised by one of my parishes, that because they have 3 county councillors representing their parish council area, they feel strongly that, like the towns, they should be allowed to apply for 3 LHIs representing those 3 county councillors, as the towns can. Whereas currently they would be restricted to 1 from the parish council and 1 from a community group. That's a reasonable compromise, and I was happy with that, and I still am. But I do think we need to review it in a year's time in the interests of equity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. I'm very happy to take those comments away. I think given the split now complex and non-complex schemes, that there might well be an argument to allow many more non-complex applications, since they will just be scored and ranked and carried forwards. So there might be some argument to look at that going forwards, but we can pick that up when we come to review the process after this current round. Do we have any other comments or questions on the LHI programme? No? Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor Shaler.
Hello, yes, just a very quick sort of summary. Thank you, Josh. And Josh made a great summary of the changes. Of course, there are a lot of details that we haven't gone over. And one, just to mention one that addresses something that Anna said, as far as active transport, we have a problem when it comes to gathering data. As I've said before, people tend to get bruised and limp home, and we don't know it's happened. So in this case, we will accept anecdotal evidence and look at the kind of surroundings. So these are the sort of changes that we've made. Also, where we can accept more smaller schemes that are less expensive, they might be appropriate in many places. A larger scheme in the old system used to tick more boxes. It's a larger scheme, it does more things, whereas several smaller schemes may in fact be better for the community. So these are the sort of changes that we've made. So there's an ocean of detail underneath the beautiful summary that Josh has made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaler, and sorry for nearly missing you off there. So if there's no further comments from anybody else, the committee is being asked to review the list of recommendations made by the cross-party member working group, B, approve the list of recommendations in time for implementation prior to 2023-2024 round of LHI applications, approve the reformation of the member working group to review the first round of non-complex schemes scores once the prioritization by officers has been completed, and to review the revised LHI process as and when once the next round of applications has been approved by the committee. Can I again take this by affirmation or no? Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Pass by affirmation. So item 6 on the agenda is a report on the delivery robots trial. And once again, I'll hand back to Sonia Hansen, Transport Manager, to take us through this one.
This report sets out the details of the food delivery robot service that is currently being trialled in Camborne by Starship Technology in partnership with the Co-op. A survey was carried out and the results are set out in the appendix, which shows a positive response to the robots. The report seeks approval for an expansion of the trial to South East Cambridge, Northstone, Longstanton. The expansion will enable further trialling of this type of autonomous last mile delivery method in different environments. There may be some areas that are not suitable, such as very narrow footways, which can be excluded from the area. The robots operate in a geo-fenced area, which can be tweaked as the trial progresses, as happened in Camborne, where the area covered was altered. Starship are planning to run a community engagement event in South East Cambridge to invite community groups to come along to meet the robots. They've engaged with the Cambridge Access Officer regarding the trial expansion, and I'm going along with them to present to the Sensory Impairment Board of Health Watch Cambridge and Peterborough. They're also meeting with the British Horse Society and have offered visits to local stables, and meeting with the RNIB, the Charity for Blind and Partially Sighted, to discuss the service.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Members, we have received questions, but I also noticed that Councillor Mark Howell is in the room. Would you like to make a statement and a comment? I don't have you down my list, but go ahead.
I apologise there, Chairman. I thought I was. I've only come here as moral support, as the assistant, really, to say about the bots and the practical things about them actually going around Camborne. I think the first thing I should say is that what everybody says when they're talking about the bots, they all smile. Everybody smiles, everybody's laughing, everybody's got a story about them. Everybody is very much enthusiastic. You will see by the statistics that 95% of the population of Camborne are very supportive or supportive. They are a wonderful, wonderful addition. I can only praise them, and they've been excellent. And as it's been said, it was just a great shame they weren't available during the pandemic and how much that would have helped people. But I just want to say to you about some of the practical things, if you don't mind. So people with disabilities or who have mobility issues have found them invaluable because they don't have to get into the car to go and make the journey to actually, especially if somebody's laid up with COVID, they self-isolating for whatever other. It doesn't replace every single shopping trip. They're not there for that. They are not designed to do a full shop, but they are there to get these small essential items. And they make a wonderful addition with regards to the environment. So it's a wonderful way of introducing to the children why we use them, why we're cutting back on car journeys. And that is a good inroad as well. And I can only speak very, very positively of them.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howell. Good to see a robot enthusiast there. So I believe we also have comments from CamCycle again. Anna, can I hand over to you to ask your questions, please? I don't know whether you can take Councillor Howell's spot.
Thanks, Chair and members. Given limited pavement space in Cambridge and existing obstructions such as wheelie bins and parked cars, we'd like to know a bit more about the delivery robot trial so far. Do the robots use footpaths only or also shared use paths for walking and cycling? What consultation has been done with people who are not reached through County Council social media channels or other online routes? Have there been negative impacts reported by those walking, cycling and wheeling? Is there any data on how the robots may be impacting short active travel journeys and perhaps replacing some walking and cycling trips to the shops? At the moment, the trial is limited to one supermarket. What would happen if other supermarkets and shops also requested use of the robots? Is there an upper limit? And finally, does anyone really believe that a trial of these robots would work in a place like Romsey with uneven potholed pavements covered with parked cars? Is it really fair to add yet another obstruction to people attempting to walk, wheel and push buggies in this area?
Thank you, Anna. Over to David for the reply.
Thank you. The robots in Camborne are generally on footpaths, but in some areas they do use some wider shared use paths. The results of the survey are included in the appendix, and the survey was emailed to a number of stakeholders: the police, fire service, ambulance service, RNIB, Guide Dogs UK, Age UK, South Cambs District Council, Health Watch Peterborough, the local MP, city and county councillors. There's no detailed information on the impact of short active travel journeys at present, but this is something that can be investigated as part of the trial. Not everyone can walk or cycle to the shops, and Starship's own customer survey found that 17% of respondents were either disabled or had someone with disabilities in the household. In other counties, the robots provide a service to other shops and businesses, so this is something that Starship will consider. But ultimately the county council can put a limit on the number of robots involved in the trial. The area of southeast Cambridge will indeed be a challenge, as there are some areas which are not suitable and would not be covered by the robots. Very narrow footways may be excluded to avoid obstruction with people attempting to walk, wheel and push buggies.
Thank you very much there, David Allen. Members, I have to say I'm I'm a robot enthusiast as well, having seen them on the streets of Camborne. And actually, I phoned my brother who lives in Camborne this morning to see what he thought, because I know initially he was a robo-skeptic, shall we say, but he has now been converted to being a robo-enthusiast and commented at how many robots he sees a steady stream of them trundling past his house and how they have been used widely throughout Camborne, including by people going for picnics in the park to have extra food delivered to them and all sorts of other uses that they weren't expecting to see. I understand that Romsey, Coleridge, QE, that they are going to be a challenge, and that is one of the reasons why I think it's important to trial them in those areas. So I do look forward to seeing how that goes. We will obviously have to be careful. They are very small pavements around there. There are challenges, but that's half of what makes it exciting, and trying to make sure how we can address those challenges in a safe way that's inclusive for all. But firstly, let me hand over to members. Do I have any questions or comments? Councillor MacDonald.
It's good to see Mark here. Mark will recall the original discussions we had about this to get it off the ground. So pleased that it's been apparently successful in Camborne. There's a logical extension which Sonia's already mentioned, which is that to Northstowe. Northstowe, it's a new development, as Camborne is, well, newer than Camborne, obviously. There is the co-op at Longstanton. So, you know, in many respects, we should, in theory, be able to copy and paste what we've been doing, I hope, in Camborne to Northstowe. And it would be a welcome, I think it would be a welcome provision for the residents in Northstowe. So I do encourage us to maybe prioritise that a little bit if we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Yes, Northstowe is an interesting one because a lot of the roads aren't adopted. So that's going to make it slightly interesting to see how that copies across. Do I have any other members that want to make any comments or raise any questions? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I listened to what Councillor Howe was saying, and obviously he, as the local member, is very much in support of this. I'm not necessarily against it. I'm just, there are a couple of issues that just give slight niggles to me, mainly on 1.3 on the paper, where it mentions that the Department for Transport haven't, although it's not specifically defined in legislation, they've not given a approval to this yet. And also reading further down on that bullet point, it mentions about the fact that if they're deemed to be mechanically propelled vehicles, then they wouldn't be allowed on footpaths. So I'm not sure where we would go then with this trial if there was legislation that came out of it. And I welcome what Sonia was saying about consulting with partially sighted and RNIB groups, because I know one of the consultees in the paper, there was quite a long piece on there where they were saying that there hadn't been adequate consultation. So those groups, I think it needs to be important to consult with them and get them on side. And finally, hopefully this doesn't happen, but I'm just questioning where the liability would lie if there was an accident that injured somebody. But I'm not against it, but I've just got the fact that we as a county council are slightly stretching legislation, shall we say, for want of a better word, gives me a slight issue.
Let me hand over to David Allett to answer some of those points.
Yep. So this is indeed just a trial for which we know that there is legislation still to come. We know that the DFT is very interested in this technology and will be putting out legislation in due course, and in discussion with other areas that have got these robots running around their networks, we felt that it was an appropriate step to almost help that process, to help to understand how this technology can work on the network in a way that is safe. But as the paper says, it remains the case that that legislation is still forthcoming, and there's a degree of risk with that, and a certain degree of we carry the liability on that. However, we introduced the trial following an extensive technical process to understand the risk and to manage the risk, and the contract that we have with Starship as part of the trial is flexible and allows us to be very responsive.
Thank you very much, David. Councillor King, I believe you were on my list.
I think Chair Councillor Bird was first.
I'm sorry, apologies. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor King. Yeah, I'm not against the scheme. I just have worries about those with disabilities, especially mobility scooters and wheelchairs. Some of the pavements, like you say, are not good enough. You have some that are quite wide. How will this machine know to go past the wheelchair? Vice versa. And also, I read in the papers about the tactiling. Will there be anything like that for people who are partly sighted, so know how to open the equipment?
So I can't answer your first point, sorry, your second point, but your first point, I know the robots do stop at a safe distance from any wheelchairs or mobility scooters, they say, and just allow them to go on. One of the really nice thing about these robots compared to other delivery vehicles is they're not under the same time pressures. So they can, wait a little bit longer for somebody that's partially sighted or disabled to be able to go around them. And they're not having to hare around like our current delivery drivers do to be able to make enough. Sorry, I don't know if you're or David is able to ask about the tactile parts, but Councillor Howe.
Just on that matter as well, with regards to people who use wheelchairs or any other object that they feel that they can't go round, they will stop after a small period of time. It can actually revert over to an actual operator. Now, the operator can look at the cameras, but they can only see up to about knee level. So if they can see that in front of them is a wheelchair user, they can reverse, and if there's a blockage, the path is too small, they can reverse the bot into somewhere else where the person in a wheelchair has a priority at all times. That is what is done, but it does revert back, and it does have to just be redone. But there's always somebody there watching and making sure. So if there's an alarm system goes off, that person can take over, but the camera can only go to about knee height. In fact, it's a bit lower. With regards to the opening, you can do it off your mobile phone, and that is also how you can order, so that both are done the same way.
Thank you very much for that useful insight, Councillor Howe. Councillor King, were you next on my list?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. I think that Councillor Sharp and Councillor Bird have made some good points about making sure that we get these details right. And I'm sure we will. There is another issue, of course, and that is with horses. There was supposed to have been, I think, a consultation with the British Horse Society that never took place. And I think we do need to do that as soon as possible, because it's not just a matter of manoeuvring around horses, it's also a matter of not frightening them. I would just make a plea that that needs to happen as soon as possible. The other thing that I think this does underline as well is, depending upon what the legislation is, that we must ensure that on new developments, shared use cycleways, shared use footpath cycleways become a standard feature. Because if we've got a wide shared use footpath cycleway, then that takes care of a lot of the potential problems. But obviously that depends on the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. On your first point around questions, I have actually spoken to Starship, and they've assured me that they're meant to be meeting with British Horse Society this week, and that they do actually have an article coming out in their newsletter in the new year, and that they are conducting socialisation trials with robots and horses. So that they are well aware of that and are hopefully taking that into account. Do I have any further questions?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm interested in these socialisation trials.
I mean, I think one of the nice things to point out with the socialisation, these robots do only move at 4 miles an hour, and they are quite slow moving. And they, as others have said, they do have a tendency to stop and wait and be cautious. They're not under the same time pressures. So I'm hoping that the horse socialisations will go well, shall we say. Do I have any other? Oh, Councillor Howell, you want to come back in again?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I just want to emphasise something which is on this. This is very much a trial. And did we make mistakes with this particular one? Yes. Where do we make mistakes? Probably on the consultation. We should have consulted a bit more. That is something we now understand, and that's something I hopefully now will go forward to the future. But what I can say is that this trial is working well in Papworth so far. small mistakes are being made. It's interesting to see that they wanted us to not to go through the public park, and other people do want us to go through the public park. So we're always going to have those particular things. And with regards to Northstowe in the future, yes, it would be ideal there as well. But the robots, instead of going to Papworth, which I think they should have done in the next time, they've been stolen into the city of Cambridgeshire. So I think you'll find lots of members here wanting the bots in their own particular area, and I can understand why. Thank you, Chairman.
Successful robots wanted everywhere. I'm not sure we'll be saying that in 100 years' time when they come for us. Thank you very much. Do I have any other comments, or should we move on? Brilliant. So the committee is asked to approve the continuation of the expansion of the trial of food delivery robots as presented within the report. Again, can I take that by affirmation? I'm assuming I haven't heard any dissenting voices.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on then, everybody. We have item 7, which is a report relating to the HGV policy. And Sonia, again, over to you for that one.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the draft heavy goods vehicle policy, which has been developed by the HGV member working group, which has met a number of times over the last nearly 2 years. The policy seeks to address concerns about the movement of HGVs on the network, whilst recognising that HGV movements support the economy of the county, delivering food and supplies and materials. The policy sets out how communities can take action to address the impact of HGV movements. In the appendix, it sets out the criteria for environmental weight limits.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Members, we've received comments from CamCycle again. So CamCycle, Anna, would you be willing to come up and give us your questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Just a short one on this one. CamCycle welcomes the review of the County Council's HGV policy and thanks members and officers for their work. There are many routes in the county where tailored restrictions of HGV traffic would significantly increase safety for active travel users. Given some historic issues with inappropriately long vehicles becoming stuck in Cambridge streets and current DFT trials of longer semi-trailers, will this policy also consider situations where there may be a need for restrictions on the basis of length as well as weight? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. CamCycle always have very good questions. Over to David.
Yeah, it is a good question. It is possible for vehicle length restriction orders to be put on roads. For example, where there's a sharp bend and long vehicles are unable to get round or get stuck. It's not something that's used very often, and it's not mentioned in the draft in the policy that we brought today. But it certainly could be added as a minor amendment to the policy if the committee was supportive.
Thank you very much. I think we now have the Democratic Services Manager to read a comment on behalf of Professor David Triffitt.
Thank you, Chair. The question is as follows. At present, HGVs have unrestricted access along Coldham's Lane in Romsey, and this residential community is suffering badly. In a nutshell, HGVs pollute heavily, endanger cyclists, and speed every night. I respectfully request that the committee firstly changes the advisory freight map to route HGVs along the A1134 rather than through this residential C road. And I request that you introduce a weight ban to prevent inappropriately sized vehicles from driving along Coldham's Lane, blighting our residential community. As your policy document states, HGVs pump out significant carbon particle pollution. This directly impacts hundreds of residents' homes. Our communal play area, the air around St Philip's Primary School, and the environment of an old person's home. The pollution blackens the lungs of our community. In short, it is destroying any hopes for active travel. The HGVs on Coldham's Lane must straddle the advisory cycle lanes because Coldham's Lane, a minor C road, is not wide enough to accommodate them. This causes cyclists to use the pavements, often bringing about collisions with pedestrians. Finally, HGVs speed dangerously at night along Coldham's Lane, causing great distress to its residents. A recent Roadwatch survey showed that over 14,000 vehicles per week along Coldham's Lane, with a maximum speed recorded of 73 miles an hour. Accidents are common. It's inexplicable that there is no traffic management at all along Coldham's Lane. A consultation by the Residents Association showed that almost all members of the community support a ban on HGVs between the Beehive Centre and Sainsbury's roundabout. We respectfully ask you action this because it fits the terms of your policy as outlined in Appendix A. Principally, a minor C road is protected while the major A road carries the HGVs for which it was designed. Terminal locations for an HGV ban are clear between Sainsbury's roundabout and the roundabout by the Beehive Centre. A strong efficient alternative exists, the A1134. There is no parish authority to action this HGV ban along Coldham's Lane, so residents turn to the members of this committee for action.
Thank you very much, Dan. Over to David for response.
Thanks for the question and comments. This could be considered if there was a funding source to progress it. It should be noted that HGVs that have business in the area would still be able to drive into the zone for loading and unloading purposes.
Thank you very much, David. Members, do I have any questions or comments or debate? Councillor Dupre, you chair this group, so thank you very much. Over to you first.
Thank you, Chair. I was hoping to make a few remarks about the policy and to commend it to you. The first thing I would want to say is that very obviously, just by looking at the proposed new policy, it is very much longer than the policy it replaces. That doesn't automatically make it better, but it does, I think, do a fuller job of putting our policies on HGVs and in particular restrictions on HGVs into a fuller context. And I think that's helpful. It explains the roles of the various bodies and agencies involved in this and what they can and can't do. It explains the legislative background to HGVs and to limits and restrictions on HGVs. It provides options, existing options, as well as laying down criteria for considering applications for the imposition of such limits. And all of that, I think, makes it a fuller and more useful document. The second thing I'd want to say is that in particular, this document now links much better to the Combined Authorities emerging local transport and connectivity plan, which was not in existence at the time. I think that I don't think the Combined Authority was in existence when the previous policy was made. But we've had, Sonia and I had a useful meeting with the Combined Authority officer responsible for the LTCP to discuss issues that had arisen in the discussions of the working group, where we felt that those were the responsibility of the Combined Authority to resolve through its LTCP rather than for the County Council to resolve through this policy. So there were about half a dozen issues, I think, that we passed over to the Combined Authority for incorporation in the LTCP, and I was very pleased indeed to see that those were there. One particular issue which seemed to have no owner at all, but which cropped up quite a lot, was the issue of safe, clean overnight stops for drivers. And nobody seems to own that. Nobody seems to have a remit to make that work across the piece, but I was pleased to see that it was mentioned, at least in the LTCP, as something that needed to be addressed by whoever, even though it couldn't be addressed by us. But we did hear a lot of evidence about that. The third thing I want to say is that this policy is intended very much to be of practical use, and it's intended, as far as possible, to put, perhaps power is too strong a word, but to enable local communities to come forward with their views about places where a restriction of this sort would be suitable, having tried the other options that are outlined in the report. And I think that that is a very helpful way forward. It particularly emphasises the need for communities to work with their neighbours. One thing we don't want, and the police over the years have been very clear that they don't want, is communities just tipping their problems onto their neighbours' lawns. And we can't have that. And this is very much about communities working together, taking responsibility, taking the ability to shape their area, working with their local members to explore options and coming forward with proposals. Now, unfortunately, the one thing that there isn't attached to this is money. So there is a cost for anybody wishing to pursue this, but I would hope that by sharing the load with neighbours, neighbouring parishes, neighbouring communities, that might be made rather more feasible. It also means that the scoring criteria in here aren't weighted or there are no points awarded, because we're not assessing how to distribute a finite resource. We are just assessing, does the application meet the criteria that we have set for it? So it's rather simpler in that respect. So that's where this policy sits. It's been a long time coming, and I think members on all sides have wanted a better policy for a long time. And I think that there has been a considerable measure of consensus among the members of the working group on how to move forward and the things that needed to be included. And I would like to thank the members of the working group for that. And I would also like to thank Sonia and the officers who've worked very hard to pull this together. It's had its moments. I remember an early iteration of the criteria in which almost every criterion ended with the word rejected, and we decided that that wasn't the message we necessarily wanted to give, but we got past that. And I think we've come up with a policy which is much more positive about communities and the difference they can make, and offers real opportunities to parishes and communities to shape their areas and address this issue in all its complexity.
Thank you very much, Lorna. And I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to you and everyone on the working group and Sonia for all your work on this. I know that HGV policy is a very tricky issue to get right, and I really appreciate the time and work that has gone into this. Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to just add my voice to this, welcoming this review and the report we have in front of us. I had the privilege of occasionally sitting in on the working group, standing in for Councillor Criswell, who's done, as Councillor Dupre will recognise, quite a lot of the work and the background to this, a lot of experience in it. However, I do want to add a couple of words of caution. One of our problems, notwithstanding the funding that Councillor Dupre has already mentioned, is that, of course, largely the enforcement agency are the police. And although there's a reference in the document, I think it's, just check, it's something like page 77 or something, the police can enforce weight restriction orders under the Traffic Regulation Act. Conducting specific operations to enforce weight restrictions will be influenced by police resources. And this has been one of the issues we faced for a long, long time. And when I was a member of the working group, and I should recognise that we did actually have police representation on the working group as well, so we did have the benefit of them. One of the examples I frequently have used is there is a weight restriction not too far from here, parallel to the A1, which goes up through the village of Sawtrey, and it's the usual 7.5 weight restriction running sort of north to south. And frequently that community complained about HGVs parking up, and this is the reference I think that Councillor Dupre made to overnight parking problems as well. Now, what HGVs were actually in contravention of that restriction, because they were parking up in the local industrial areas, and no action was being taken by the police for it. And the argument the police were putting, which is understandable, even if it's contrary to what our proposals are, is that that was a safe area for them to park up. It meant they weren't parking in laybys on the A1 or whatever. It was the obviously ensuing problems that they sometimes faced in doing that. And of course, it gave them access to local facilities, like the local pub might provide them with meals, or yeah, they could go somewhere. So the police were very reluctant to enforce that weight restriction. And so it's important that we somehow get the full support where it's a particular problem, but we have to be realistic that there will be contraventions of this. The other point I wanted to make was relates to, I noticed here it also says that trading standards can help to enforce weight restrictions. Of course, trading standards, and it says, because we don't provide funding for it anymore, which is a bit of a shame, because not only that, but the particular role of trading standards was that they operated the weighbridge type things. There is one on the A1 where they would haul in vehicles that they felt were unsafe, they were overloaded, they hadn't been MOT'd or whatever, they're dangerous. And it's a shame that if we're no longer doing that, but that is one of the main roles that trading standards used to carry out. The other point I wanted to make is in terms of route mapping. So advisory through in this case, and we're quite in a way silent on that, is that we have to work closely with other local highway authorities. Because as we know, much of the traffic that we're talking about is passing through Cambridgeshire, not accessing particularly Cambridgeshire. And if they divert and go via other routes, but often if we don't match those to say Suffolk and that, if you look at the East Coast ports and traffic traveling to the likes of the Midlands and this thing are coming through Cambridgeshire. So unless we actually working closely with those in terms of sat nav processes and all those things, so I'd like to see more about how we're going to achieve that and how other local and neighbouring authorities feel about it and how degree to which we are working closely with them. There's just a couple of points I wanted to make, but otherwise I welcome this report, and I would like to add my thanks to the Dupre as chairing it and Sonia for the work done, because it has needed a major review over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maguire. Actually, just on one of your points there about enforcing, we did hear earlier about TMA Part 6, and I believe that can be used to enforce it. So there might be some routes going forwards as we look at things. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I welcome the report, and I'd like to thank the working group for what they've done on this. But I've got a few points. A couple of points that Councillor Dupre mentioned was obviously funding, because it's going to be expensive for the parishes. And the second thing she touched on was the issue, and Councillor Maguire touched on it as well, is the issue around the overnight stops. Because certainly in my ward, I've got a team of volunteers who call themselves Rubbish Friends, who go out and do a lot of litter picking around the villages and the lanes, and they pick up some absolutely horrible stuff from some of the lay-bys. So I'm not going to go into graphic details, but it's not great. My division is, a lot of it is all the villages south of the that are south of Newmarket, that are in Cambridgeshire. And we do have an issue at the moment with the A14 in that the roadworks are causing big long delays. So everybody uses the A14 bypass, which is known as Newmarket High Street. And it's absolutely gridlocked morning and evening. I was stuck in it last week coming back from West Suffolk Hospital for about 20 minutes. And what we're ending up doing, what's happening is not just HGVs, but cars and vans as well, are just rat running through the villages and parts of even Newmarket, some of the bits of Suffolk, some bits of Newmarket are in my ward. So as Councillor Maguire said, a lot of these vehicles are just transiting through Cambridgeshire on their way to the Midlands or the North. So I've certainly got one parish which I would look to explore how we can get some limits there, but obviously we've got to make sure that doesn't affect local businesses. But we've got some tight bends in that village, and HGVs are going through there and causing, at the moment there's not been an accident, but it's one waiting to happen, so to speak. So I do welcome it, but I think it gives us maybe the tools to actually go forward and address some of those issues. But with the lack of funding and things like how we deal with the overnight stops, that's not an easy solution in our hands, because obviously we need to try and get adequate facilities for HGV drivers, but that's easier said than done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sharp. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I would add my support to the other comments from members. I think that the working group has done a really good job in moving on policy from where it was to where it is now. One thing that is referred to, Sonia has referred to in the paper, and we shouldn't forget and try and solidify the working here with the traffic commissioners. It's the traffic commissioners who license HGVs. Some of my villages going through the hierarchy where they haven't been able to get voluntary changes to routes by HGV operators, they have started that discussion with the traffic commissioners, and the traffic commissioners will listen to this. And believe me, an HGV operator who gets a note from a traffic commissioner will pay a lot of attention to it, including what Alan mentioned before, which is overnight conditions, and what Mac mentioned. The traffic commissioners will address these things. So as we go forward, please can we work with them a little bit more? But well done on where you've got to so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think Councillor MacDonald makes a very good point there about the traffic commissioners. I have two questions. The first one is, which I'm sure Sonia is half expecting. Will this make the possibility of the imposition of temporary weight restrictions easier?
It doesn't change the process for temporary weight restrictions, the policy that's set out in law.
I think we do. That's disappointing, I have to say, and that was my reading of the policy as well, because we did have, or I had a number of discussions with Sonia by email and in person about the impact of the closure of the Guy-Hone roundabout. And HGVs, not all of them, but some of them, were going through the villages in my division rather than following the official diversion route. And National Highways were quite happy to pay the costs of those temporary diversions, and the police resisted that, and we were not willing to override them. And I would like us to do that in future, so that when there is a clear case of people not following the official diversion route, and where there is the possibility of somebody else paying for it, we should snatch their hand off. So I'm disappointed that that isn't reflected in this policy, and I hope that perhaps this can be addressed. The second question I have is about communication. I think that the idea of encouraging parishes to take ownership through HGV Watch is a very good idea, and we need to communicate that with the parishes so that they can get involved in that if they so wish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. Councillor Dupre. Oh, do I not have you down? Sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to briefly, sorry, I had temporarily forgotten what I was going to respond to. It was just the, but I have now remembered just in the nick of time. It was the comment about the traffic commissioners, and I do entirely agree that they are an important part of the picture. And it is one of the things, one of the few things actually, because I think the working group did a very good job overall. But one of the things I do regret is that we were unable to get the meeting with the traffic commissioners that we had wanted to explore their role in this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dupre. Councillor Shayler.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you for Councillor Dupre and also David and Anna for your questions. And I hope you're a little more assured about the will on this committee. We look at health in all things, and there can be other solutions, last mile delivery, this sort of thing. We take HGVs seriously, clearly, and that can be seen by the sticks we've made to beat ourselves with, all of the working groups, HGVs, LHIs in 20-mile-an-hour zones. So I hope that in the future this will provide some help for Coldham's Lane and other similar streets across the county. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shaler. Do I have any other members? Oh,
May I just ask, Chair, how we are going to capture my concerns about the temporary weight restrictions, because this is a matter of grave concern for my parishes. Thank you.
I think we're going to have to get back to you on that one, Councillor King. I think one of the problems we have obviously is enforcement, that putting a temporary weight restriction in, if the police won't enforce it, does become a problem, but it is something that we can take away and look into. Councillor Dupre, sorry, did you want to come back in on that one?
Yes, just to say that like any other policy, I'm sure this is capable of review, and it might be worth penciling in a review at some suitable stage to see how it has gone, within a little while of it having been implemented. I'm sure we could be able to pick that up within that process.
I would, if I may just come back, Chair, I would welcome that review. And I think that this particular issue about the temporary weight restrictions, I often hear this argument, we can't do it because it won't be enforced. If that applies to so many things, doesn't it? That we can basically abolish all speed limits, and just go in for a free-for-all for almost anything because it won't be enforced adequately. And I just think that's a fallacious argument, and it just gives the police a get-out-of-jail-free card. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. And yes, I do look forward to looking at other ways that we can enforce these going forwards as well. I think that will help greatly. Obviously, with potentially coming forward to the A428 works as well, we might have more questions about HGV routing while those works are going on. So I think this is something that we will probably need to look at going forwards, particularly with those works and others going on around the county. Personally, I just wanted to add with my city county councillor hat on, that it's quite interesting looking at this from a city perspective. We obviously have a lot of HGVs serving the city at the moment, and they have a large influence on people's lives. We heard from obviously Coldham's Lane there, some of my own residents on Fendon Road, Mowbray Road, also are kept awake at night by HGVs serving the city. So I think that is something that we do need to look at, is how we can reduce down in our urban areas, particularly the need for HGVs, and move towards lower impact delivery vehicles. I know I welcome the fact that the GCP is doing a lot of work within city access on trying to reduce down those large delivery vehicles and trying to do freight consolidation. So I think that's very welcome. One thing I would ask for this though, the document is incredibly good and I'm very happy with the work that's been done. It would be very nice if we could add a kind of contact section to it though, particularly for around I noticed that that in the first instance, people need to look to their parish councils and town councils and city councils. With parishes, it's far more obvious where you go on that. When it becomes to particularly the city of Cambridge, it can be quite complicated to know who in the city of Cambridge that you would need to deal with to be able to ask for that for my residents. So if possible, I would ask that perhaps we add some sort of contacts list to this for all of those different agencies they should be, contacting, just to make it slightly easier for people applying for this. But I very much welcome this work, and I'm very pleased with the outcome. So Councillor Dupre and everybody on the group, very well done on that. Do I have any further comments though, or can I take it by affirmation that we all agree with the recommendations? Let me just read out the recommendations again for completeness. The committee is asked to the commercial vehicle HCV access restriction policy within the Highways Operations Standards document. This content will be removed from the HOS, and agree the Director of Highways and Transport in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Highways and Transport Committee may approve minor amendments to the HGV policy. So we'll be adopting this. Is that, sorry, Councillor King.
We keep banging on about this, Chair, but can we add something about the suggestion that Councillor Dupre made about a review date?
Unfortunately, Councillor King, at this moment, we can't take it as an amendment to what the committee is being asked to do, as we're not within the time period for that. But I can ask that it does state here that in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Highways and Transport Committee may approve minor amendments. I will take it upon us to find a suitable date for a revision of this going forwards in the same way we do with LHIs and other policies.
Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant. Can I take it therefore by affirmation? Or do we have any dissent? Councillor King again. Oh, sorry, you were agreeing. We do like a good hand raise here in the committee. Brilliant. Thank you very much then, everybody. So what time is it now? Okay, I think we can carry on going for a little bit. Item 8 is the local walking and cycling infrastructure plan, the LC WIP. And I'm going to ask Claire Rankin to present this report. Over to you, Claire. Thank you.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Claire Rankin, project manager within the project delivery team. Just for a bit of background, as part of the government's first cycling and walking investment strategy in 2017, which was then updated this year, it was recommended that local authorities should develop a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, and advised that those authorities with plans would be well placed to make the case for future funding. The government guidance set out recommended methodology to identify the routes with the highest potential to increase the number of people walking and cycling for short trips, and then also the prioritisation criteria for these routes. So the Cambridgeshire plan covers the whole county, which is actually quite a large area and much larger than many other local authorities have included in their plans. Following guidance, we used the census data to map cycle journeys to work. And so to a certain extent, levels of population dictated the fact that most of the highest scoring routes are in or between larger urban areas. But to ensure there was a better spread across the county rather than all concentrated in Greater Cambridge, which would have been the danger, we identified the top cycle routes for each district. For walking, we focused on Cambridge, Ely, and the larger market towns, as well as Camborne is the largest sort of urban centre in South Cambridgeshire, and considered the main routes to key destinations such as schools, employment, retail, and leisure. So the LC WIP is not intended to fill all the gaps in the county's walking and cycling network, but aims to highlight the key routes which are likely to increase usage and reduce short car trips and represent value for money. A public consultation was undertaken last summer. People were asked for their views on the LC WIP, both as a method for prioritising strategic walking and cycling routes and on the routes themselves. And as an appendix to the report is the consultation report, which summarises the responses. People were also asked to mark comments on an interactive map, and we had a lot of comments on that. The majority of just over 800 respondents supported the plan. There was a lot more, there's over 1,000 comments that we had on the map. The largest number of responses were from Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire, which did mean that there were a limited number of strong views on the proposed routes in the other districts. Generally, the response was neutral. The majority of respondents agreed with the proposed Cambridge routes, but in South Cambridgeshire, there was a sort of strong opinion, both for and against, with this district having the highest number of people who did not support the routes. And that generally reflects a large number of comments from places like Wilbraham and Willingham, who wanted to have more routes to their villages. So a lot of comments about rural connections. So this report summarises the main themes that came back from the consultation, which, as well as the lack of rural routes, which I've just mentioned, included the importance of maintenance, the need for more focus on mobility issues, on equestrians, and the use of the outdated census data from 2011, as well as the need to include walking routes for smaller market towns such as Romsey and Littleport. So following the consultation, the plan has been updated a little to reflect and reference recent guidance, data, and policies and strategic work. The maps and prioritised lists have also been amended to reflect changes in the status of the routes. Additional route proposals and demand for more rural connectivity has been fed into the development of the active travel strategy and action plan, which also considers issues such as maintenance and mobility. Provision for equestrians isn't in the remit of the plan, but the content of the plan does highlight the need to ensure that they're taken into consideration, And the new non-motorised user design guide, which is currently being developed, will be a key document when looking at the detail of the routes. So as set out in the report, the LCWIP is intended to form one part of the county's aim to encourage active travel and sits within a suite of transport and strategy documents under the Combined Authorities Transport and Connectivity Plan. It's by no means a static document. In particular, the status, descriptions and possible alignment of the routes will change as feasibility work is undertaken and improvements are delivered. In the time from the consultation to now, parts of some routes have been delivered, and that's reflected in the updates. The new census data is an opportunity to sense check the prioritized routes that we have, although with the caveat that many of the travel to work patterns were changed due to the effects of lockdown, and so some of those changes will be temporary, and we're not quite sure yet. So with this all this in mind, I hope you can support the recommendation to adopt the current plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. So members, we received comments from CamCycle. Over to you, Anna, again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. CamCycle strongly welcomes the publication of the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, and we thank officers, and particularly Claire, for the huge amount of work that has gone into this document. We know how crucial it is to ensure our region gains the investment it needs for active travel schemes right across the county. There is a lot of useful data from the consultation which aligns with feedback we receive on aspects including the need for safer junctions, better maintenance, more space for walking and cycling, and more accessible routes. Point 2.4 in the contents of the LCWIP refer to maps and prioritisation matrices for cycling and walking, but these weren't included in the report. Are these, or will they be posted somewhere members of the public can view them? Given the decrease of modal share in some districts mentioned on page 9 of the LCWIP and the decrease in cycling in all districts of Cambridgeshire as revealed by the latest DFT figures based on the National Active Lives Survey, does the county have an indication of timescales for these walking and cycling improvements to be put in place? Finally, we note that often urban areas have been prioritised because of a higher propensity to cycle and therefore greater increase in active travel journeys. However, if our region wants to achieve its goal of reducing car miles by 15% by 2030 to tackle carbon emissions, it will also be important to look at medium-length journeys, for example, into and out of market towns. There isn't any mention of e-bikes or the type of journeys and routes that should be focused on to enable their uptake. Is there any plan to consider these medium-length journeys?
Thank you very much, Anna. Over to David Howard.
Thanks, Anna. A link to the maps is at the bottom of the agenda, and the matrices can be provided on demand. All of the documents will be put on the County Council website following this meeting. Some schemes are more advanced than others. For example, the Hills Road scheme, the top route for Cambridge City, is currently being designed up as part of the GCP Cycling Plus project. East Cambridgeshire District Council are actively pursuing funding for the delivery of the Wicken Fen to Soham route, and others may be delivered through new developments, so there will be different timescales for the different routes. A variety of funding sources have been and are being used to undertake feasibility work on some routes, and we're actively pursuing further funding for design work in order to have a pipeline of schemes for delivery to take advantage of funding as it becomes available. Many of the LCWIP routes link together or to existing routes to create longer medium length journeys, and many of these are between villages and market towns. We need to connect the closest villages to the larger urban areas as a first step, and then we can look further out.
Thank you very much, David. We're now joined on by Bill Blake on Zoom, representing Coldhams Lane Romsey Residents Association. Thank you for joining us, Bill. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
On behalf of the Coldhams Lane Romsey Residents Association, can the committee urgently consider traffic reduction measures on the Romsey section of Coldhams Lane as part of the local cycling and walking plan? Coldhams Lane between Sainsbury's Roundabout and the Beehive Centre is heavily used as a shortcut between 2 points on the ring road and carries traffic at peak times, which forces cyclists, many of which are school children, to use the pavements, leading to conflicts with pedestrians. Phase 2, the Chisholm Trail crosses the lane at a busy intersection with Cromwell Road, and increasing numbers of cyclists are queuing and blocking the pavements on both sides of the lane to wait for the lights at peak times. Given the importance of the trail to the promotion of active travel in the city, can the committee say what measures are to be put in place to improve the situation, in particular how and when the local access designation for Coldham's Lane is to be implemented? Residents have expressed a strong desire for improved safer provision for cycling and walking on Coldham's Lane, as well as a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit and a nighttime ban on HGVs. Can the committee advise on how traffic reduction measures can be incorporated into the local access designation with clear benefits for active travel? The proposed design for the Chisholm Trail crossing of Coldham's Lane by Milestone shows a lack of active travel priority. Given the proposed local access designation for Coldham's Lane, can the committee advise on how an active travel priority crossing can be achieved?
Thank you very much, Bill. Over to David.
Thank you. Yeah, this section of Coldham's Lane is included as an LC WIP route in the plan, so it is a priority for us. Options for improvements will be aligned to the GCP's work on the road classification, and that's a consultation that's recently ended. So we'll continue to work with the GCP on this priority.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much, Bill. Members, do I have any questions or comments or debate? Does anyone want to start me off? Okay, brilliant. Over to you, Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question and a couple of points, so I'll roll it all into one contribution if that's okay with you.
I think.
The question is on the consultation results itself, and I wonder if there's any more granular detail available that officers have that show the location of the respondents. Because whilst I take the point that is made in the report in the presentation around how potentially the number of respondents from Cambridge and South Cambs has almost skewed the data for the other districts. Let's say, and I accept that's the most likely scenario that's happened there. It could also be read as general apathy on the routes proposed in Huntingdonshire, East Cambs and Fenland. And so I just wonder if that data exists that shows, that sort of proves that point actually, that it is just the fact that many more people responded from Cambridge and South Cambs and therefore didn't have strong views. Because when I look at the data in the report, it does indicate that the vast majority of respondents really have no views on those routes. And of course, you know, many of us do hear quite regularly that council builds all these cycleways and you never see anyone using them. So it would concern me that we have data in front of us saying, well, actually, we're not really fussed about any of the proposals you've got there for East Cambs, Huntingdonshire and Fenland, and how we then perhaps justify that in the future. And I'm not suggesting that is my view, that we build all these routes and, you know, they're a waste of time, because I don't believe they are. But I think that's something we need to be able to respond to at some point. So the granular detail would be useful just to confirm that point. Did you want me to stop and get an answer before going on to the second point?
Yes, of course. I can actually answer in some of that myself, but I know within the report we have maps of responses and showing the heat map of who responded where. So I'm assuming, over to Claire, that data does exist and is able to be broken out. I think it actually is even in the report, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I'm not sure it's in the report of exactly who said what, but I think, you know, that could be looked at. But it's certainly in the report. It shows where the majority of people responded. You've got the heat map, which was very much South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge. So a lot of most of the responses from those people were neither supporting nor opposing the routes. But you know, whether we can look at it, as you say, on a more granular basis of exactly who said what, that's something we could look at.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the heat maps are there, but I'm looking at a paragraph, for example, that says 547 respondents answered the question on Huntingdonshire. Only a third of them agreed or somewhat agreed with the proposed routes. So I think it's perhaps just the way we're presenting it. Actually, what would be interesting to me is how many Huntingdonshire residents answered that question and how many of those residents agreed or disagreed with the proposed routes. And I accept we can have views on routes in other districts, that we're not that parochial, but just for the
way we're being presented this data, and that we can then go back and use it with our communities, a bit more granular detail would be useful if possible, please. But I shall leave that in the hands of officers. And then saying not being parochial, to move to my second point, I'm afraid I am going to be very parochial here, and use my position on this committee to speak up for my division, because I did submit as part of this process a request for consideration of anything around Witton on the Hill and RAF Witton. And this actually followed on from requests I've had from parts of my community. And when I look at this map for the Huntingdon and St Ives area, it's fantastic. You know, I agree, it's great. There's a lot of connections here that will solve lots of issues that have been going on for a great number of years. But when I listen to the report being presented and I read the detail, and we're really talking about the purpose of doing this is to encourage people out of their cars and to be able to use bikes to get around more often. For those of you that don't know Witton on the Hill, it is an entirely isolated community. The only way in or out of it is to use a car. And so there's a really big missed opportunity, I think, here, not to have sought to connect that. And when you look at the map, you can actually see, I'm not going to say easy, because I appreciate cycle routes aren't easy and they're certainly not cheap, but there are easy ways, I will say easy, to connect it into St Ives and Huntingdon indeed. And when we hear that the rationale for how some of this has been done is population figures, I would contend Witton on the Hill is actually bigger than Hemmingford Abbots, sorry, Councillor Dew, Kings Ripton, Little Stupely, Great Stupely, and even Oldcombury, all of whom are being served by proposals within this plan. I would also point out RAF Witton, which sits in my division, is a very big local employer with many people working there, not actually living on the base, they live off base, and again can only access their workplace by using cars. So I'm not going to go on because I appreciate I'm being very parochial, but I would be letting my residents down if I didn't stress the point that, you know, I would hope this could be looked at again, because there are at least 1,500 residents there that are solely reliant on their cars, and we're not going to help them use cycles if we don't give them some cycleways. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for indulging me.
I will forgive you for being a little bit parochial there, but probably ask that the rest of us steer clear of that. One thing I will note in this is that this does need to be reviewed going forwards and making sure that it is kept current, because as we develop within Cambridgeshire, there is going to be many more demands. So I do take your point that this does need to be very much kept up to date and looked at going forwards to make sure that these are the right prioritised routes. I believe there are also other routes below the LC whip as well, so yours may fit in there, but I'll let Claire get back to you offline about your exact routes and where they fit into the plan. Councillor Dew.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be slightly parochial as well, because I actually support Councillor Fuller on that one with Witton on the Hill. It does run alongside my division, so the need is both sides of that road, and it's surprising that it's not there, especially in view of the fact that I believe that the local base commandant has actually reached out to the Highways Department here with a view to having a meeting with talking about several issues going forward. So hopefully this will form part of it, and that will help in due course. The thing that I think we just need to review going forward is, and I have mentioned it to the Vice Chairman in conversations in the past, and it's gone no further than that, so I'm not suggesting he hasn't done anything, because that's not the case at all. There's a few cycle routes that have come up in other plans in the past, such as the A14 legacy money, that seem to totally disappeared off the face of the earth on this now. There was a route from Hilton through to Fence Stanton and then to St Ives that was at one time funded, and I've seen the paperwork to support that. So I don't know what's happened there, why it's fallen away. I've been asked by the parish council, you know, what's happening, and they provided, you know, all the paperwork going back a few years on this. So I'll take it up with Ms Potter and see where we can go with that. That would be a useful one to have, because as I have been asked on that, and the others are really just trying to get the cycle routes that do exist up to scratch. I mean, a couple of the ones that we've got, the Hemmingford Abbots, Hemmingford Grey, Hemmingford Abbots one, at the moment, a lot of the route doesn't provide a safe route to the local school. The cycle route goes about halfway from the edge of the village to the school and then doesn't fill the rest in. So we need to find a way of taking that forward in due course. And the other one that we have is the 1123 route from St Ives to Huntingdon, which runs through Houghton and Witton, the advised route is to cycle up the thicket, for which, for those of you who don't know, is a nice wooded area, and that's exactly what it is. And there's a lot of people do that, but there's a lot of people use the alternative route as well along the main road, and that's simply, we've got pavements there that are designated as cycle routes, and they simply are not. They're not actually wide enough in a couple of spaces to be pavements. So I think if we can have a review to bring some of those back in, to just bring up to standard what we've got, because it's great having it on the map, but I just need to be satisfied in due course that it does the job it should do. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. I've now got Councillor Dupre.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that this is going to be a debate that lends itself entirely to parochialism, so I shall, and I shall not be swayed. It so happens that last night the East Cambridgeshire District Council's bus cycle walking group met, and Councillor Sharp and I were in attendance at that meeting. So we had a brief conversation there about the LC whip. One issue that came up regarding East Camp, I raised it, was the issue about LTN 120 and the ability to comply with that in very rural areas. And we had a bit of a discussion about that, and there was a view which I think was shared, and Councillor Sharp will no doubt jump in to correct me if I'm wrong, that we should not be completely giving up on LTN 120 in rural areas, but should try our very, very hardest to ensure good quality LTN compliance schemes before we just shrug our shoulders and say, sorry, it's the countryside, what do you expect? So I would really hope for every effort to be made to produce good LTN 120 compliance schemes in rural areas. And that's actually across county issue, so that's not that parochial, is it? The cycling section refers to increased cycle parking, but not safe crossing points, and that's an issue for cycles as well as for walking. The Soham walking routes map refers to a proposed railway station, which has for some time actually been built and in place. I'm assuming that, bearing in mind the huge changes in population that were noted in the early release of the 2021 census, that might well be a trigger to look at some of this again, bearing in mind very considerable movements in the numbers of people in some of the various locations. But other than that, that is all I have to say.
Thank you, Lorna, and I very much welcome your non-parochial comments there. And LTN 120 compliance in rural areas is important, or looking at what we can do to the best standards. And your point about new census data is also a very good one. So next I have Councillor King. Can you assure me it's non-parochial?
Yes, I can actually.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I know that what we're considering is cycling and walking, but there is another large group of non-motorized users, wheelchair users, horse riders, etc. And I would hope that we can perhaps produce a similar document that addresses their needs.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. Yes, other NMU users. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be totally parochial. I'll be maybe East Cams parochial, if that. Yes, as Councillor Dupre said, we had a bus cycling walking group Zoom call last evening. It's a cross-party group that's been running for about 3 years. I've been chairing it for that time, and it's by and large worked well. And it's just a couple of points. I mean, we're looking at the routes for East Cambridgeshire. There's the top 4 or 5 are great in terms of routes around the city, and I think that then mirrors itself obviously to many more routes in and around Cambridge, where I was going to say it's not necessarily easier because there might be some restrictions on width of pavements, widths of road, etc., but possibly that there's the costs are less than maybe some of the rural alternatives. East Cams we did use some funding to get Sustrans to do some feasibility work on about 5 different routes, which we then did engage with parish councils along those particular routes to try and get a feedback. And we discussed last night about taking that the next stage. We had that meeting, I think about July, I think it was. So taking that forward. So it's really, you know, welcome the report, but obviously the more rural routes come at a bigger cost, because by and large they're longer routes. I do agree with Councillor Dupre about the LTN 120, which we discussed, that we don't want to reduce the quality, because that may even mean that we don't get the funding anyway, because we don't agree with the criteria. And it's trying to, maybe e-bikes, Hannah mentioned it, I think it was Hannah mentioned e-bikes. That may be an alternative for some people who can afford them in the rural area, so they can do 4 or 5 mile routes instead of, which probably a lot of people think is a maximum for them to be able to cycle. And the last point I've got is around, again, living right on the Suffolk border as I do. I know there's an agreement between Suffolk and Cambridgeshire about there's a route from Burwell to Exning, because there's actual building development on both sides of the county boundary, and I think both county councils are funding a cycle route across there. But equally further south into my area, where what we don't want is, you know, to get something that stops at the Cambridge Suffolk border without reciprocal route on the other side. And there are certainly routes that we could work on, but obviously we need cooperation from and funding from both sides. But broadly, I welcome it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sharp. Do I have anybody else? No. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, I'm just going to firstly say a massive thank you to Claire and her team, because I know this has been a Herculean amount of work to actually go through all of this, and keeping it up to date will also be a Herculean amount of work in making sure that we bring forwards as many of these as possible, and that we respond to the needs as our county goes forward. It's obviously very easy to see how important active travel is going forwards with our climate emergency, and it's really good to see this administration as a council as a whole as really prioritising active transport and making sure that it is very much a part of our transport mix going forwards, and gets the attention that it deserves. So let me come to a conclusion though, and say what we're being asked to do here is adopt the Cambridgeshire Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan, and B, to delegate future review and update of the plan to the Director of Highways and Transport in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee. Obviously, that update work is going to be very important going forwards, but can I take that by affirmation that we all agree with that going forwards? Brilliant. And Councillor King, I'll take that hand up as an approval, not a wish to speak. Thank you very much. Members, we are now at 10 to 12. We've been going for 1 hour and 50 minutes. We have 2 items left in the agenda, but may I suggest we take a very short 5-minute break, but we try and make it as short as possible, because then hopefully we will be done by lunchtime. So can I ask everybody to be back here at 11:56, and we will continue with the last 2 items of the agenda. Thank you very much. Members, how are we doing? It's now been 6 or 7 minutes. Back in the room, please. Thank you. McDonald, you're late. Right, members, let's get started again because I know we all want to get to lunch, and that's the other thing. So item 9 is the business planning report, and I'll invite Steve Cox, sitting next to me, to introduce the report. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first step in the business planning process for 23-24. The proposals will work their way through to full council in February. I won't go through all the details, but there's a backdrop to the process is set out in sections 1, 2 and 3. The important point, I think, in section 1 is to note the financial gap that the council is having to address going into next year, standing at around 28-29 million pounds, which is I don't need me to tell you that's very significant and something that is taking a lot of our attention as officers to come up with options for that. That includes an account taken of inflation pressures, which has added significantly to the gap. Against that backdrop, then we need to look at options for the savings, and in the paper are those that are relevant to the Highways and Transport Committee. We spoke a little bit earlier about street lighting. You'll see within the paper that that's a set of proposals in there variously for energy saving options, for dimming, part night switch offs, which are detailed. All of this is subject to further business planning work, but important to share some of this early thinking with you ahead of coming back to committee in December. Also in the paper are proposals around a highways material recycling facility, capital investment needed, but a hugely exciting potential project that hits both potential financial savings as well as carbon savings, and also a note around some of the inflation pressures that we're facing in highways that I think go over and above some of the other inflation pressures that we're seeing across other parts of the organisation. The next steps after today is to get your thoughts and comments on those proposals before they go into business cases. They'll come back later in the autumn and then on to SNR as a package, part of the budget in January, and then to council in February. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Steve. I am deeply concerned by the situation going forwards, given the inflationary pressures that we're having in highways. We are in quite extraordinary times, and I only hope that our central government realises that and helps us with this going forwards. Members, do I have any comments or questions or any debate? Councillor MacDonald.
Steve will be pleased to know that I don't expect him to answer this question. And it's probably for strategy and resources, but Ofgem yesterday mentioned the possibility of restricted gas supplies and power cuts. So don't worry, Steve, I'm not asking you to solve all the council's problems. So, I mean, we're looking at a paper talking about dimming. We might have enforced dimming. This is one for probably for strategy and resources and not for here, but I don't know what the process is, if we could start to think about it. Presumably we will get some government guidelines at some stage.
Yeah, I won't try and answer the question or indeed the solution, but there is work going on contingency planning across the council to look at how we might need to save energy over the course of the winter. You know, the situation is evolving and changing, but we need to be ready for it, and that's something we're very aware of. And street lighting, I think, is over 50% of our energy use, so we need to keep that in mind as part of that process.
Thank you very much, Steve. And yes, it is definitely something we need to keep in mind, particularly with our contracts that we currently have with street lighting and how we can vary those. Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, we also are all concerned about the increase in energy costs, and if by introducing an LED replacement program with a 7-year return on whatever the investment is, then we would hope in time that would be considered. But I would want to express my concern, having gone I'm long enough in the tooth here to have gone through this exercise way back in 2011 area when we had the PFI. We started off the PFI bid for our lighting stock and how we were going to reduce costs as well as cover the maintenance of old stock. I am very concerned, and I'm sure other members will be, if we look at, as it's saying, further dimming and part night lighting. I know it was a big concern to people, residents in Cambridge in particular. They were talking about some of the green areas of reducing lighting in that. Oh, sorry, not talking into me, right? Reducing lighting, and I know it's of great concern. So I hope we can find ways around that, because I think we already have fairly draconian lighting, and a lot of concerns were expressed at that time, and we've not been able to resolve them. Did have to reduce dimming. We did have to introduce further dimming and part night lighting. I think it's something like it runs from 1 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the morning. So that is my concern, Chairman. I hope that will obviously be taken into serious consideration, but I understand the LED replacement. I've been involved in that technology for many years, and would certainly look forward to something which reduces our energy costs. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maguire. I also share your concerns about reducing down light output. It definitely would not be up there with my first choices of what to do. It has a very significant impact on our residents and users, and therefore I really wouldn't favour it, but we have to be very realistic, unfortunately, at the moment, given the current situation that the country is in. So it is right that we start to put those options on the table and at least investigate what it would look like if we needed to do it, if we are either forced, as Councillor MacDonald alludes to, with a lack of energy, or if it's just required in budget terms. But thank you very much. Do I have anybody else? Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have experienced underspends in recent years. Have any measures been taken to try and mitigate that possibility this time round? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor King. We're looking at all options this year and next. So any underspends that there are this year, we'll look to make savings if we can. We need to carry on with the business of delivering, certainly in highways and transport as well. So we'll be looking very carefully at where there are potential underspends, so we can build up reserves if that is at all possible to help with next year's and the year after's challenges that we have. But that's a balance we have to strike.
I think the danger, Chair, is that, we can agree a series of cuts which then turn out not to be necessary. So I think it's absolutely essential that we get our forecasts as right as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have anybody else? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. And, I agree with Councillor Maguire's comments about looking at LED lights and replacing it. And I also welcome the look at the recycling of the building materials, because that's got to be a way forward. Because I dread to think how many tons of building materials are just dumped across the country. Some unfortunately get dumped on the entrance to farmers' fields. In my division, I had quite a big load of stuff during the summer, which is obviously totally unacceptable, but it's trying to catch the culprits. But I digress. But broadly, I agree with that. And I just wanted to touch on something Councillor Dupre mentioned earlier when we were talking about parishes and the LED replacements. And again, it's going to be slightly parochial, is that, yes, whilst I agree we need to be looking at LED replacements, but I can think of 2 of my local parishes have actually done that out of their own finances. So I just want to make sure there's a level playing field. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sharp. And yes, while we're looking at LED replacements, there actually might be some efficiencies to be looking at, whether we can share some costs with local parishes in terms of, you know, the efficiencies of after a large number at the same time might reduce costs for them slightly. So that's something we can look at. Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Chairman. I should have mentioned this one earlier. It's not LEDs, but I can't think of a better opportunity than this one to raise this again. Members will have heard me say, and other members have expressed their concern about our staffing problems, both in the fact that we're having to pay agency staff and the difficulty in recruiting staff. And I know it's Sue has, well, others have heard me saying it. I'm trying to find a way if we can if I can formally ask that we actually do some benchmarking. I know we've discussed this informally. The reason I say it is because, you know, during my working life, I worked for one of the largest corporations in this country, and we had, in a way, similar problems. We had a particular division that I worked in who had difficulty in recruiting. And again, we became over-reliant, I believe, on agency staff. When we talked to other divisions weren't suffering the same problems. So HR were tasked with finding out what was the difference between our division and other divisions. What were we not doing, or what they were doing? It turned out, it happened that it was the actual employment package that we were offering wasn't quite as good as some of the other divisions, so they obviously had freedoms that we didn't have. But it highlighted the differences, and so what I'm actually suggesting is, could we do a proper benchmarking, particularly with other local highways authorities, to find out to what extent they are suffering similar problems to us and how they are addressing them. So I'd like it to, you know, if we can have some sort of formal approach to this, Chairman, rather than just, well, we believe it's happening right across the industry. And I think we believe that is the case and that they're going elsewhere. Why are they going elsewhere? How do we attract them back?
Thank you, Councillor Maguire. We actually heard in the HIB the other day about some of the issues our contractors are having with staff as well, but I'll hand over to Sue for a more formal answer.
Yes, thank you for that. And yes, we can have a look at how we compare as our remuneration package for people coming into the authority compared to others. But I would say that this is the message that we're getting across the board. So in my previous authorities and my office's previous authorities, they are in the same situation as are our contractors. So it is a sector-wide issue. But I would say that we have been doing quite a lot of work with HR to look at how we promote the advantages of working for Cambridgeshire, because there are a lot of advantages working here. We can actually offer a broad range of experiences, not just with the county council, but also with our contractors and partners. So we're looking at how we can develop that more closely as well. We are about to launch a major recruitment campaign across the board, which we've worked quite heavily with HR and how we develop that, but also looking at launching an apprenticeship program as well to bring people in before they develop the skills, so that we can develop the skills with them and develop them through the sort of grow your own program, which will feed not necessarily now, but will feed us in the future, because we've got to build in a sustainability cycle into our need for those skills and knowledge as we go forward. But certainly on that comparison, we can see what piece of work we could do on that.
If I can just come back on that and thank Sue for that, Chairman. I mean, and it is welcome, but it'd be useful because it's across the whole council as well. But to actually, for members to see a report, to see where we compare with others and what is happening elsewhere to try to attract them, because we're in a, you know, it's a game of playing against others, trying to make sure that they come to this more attractive Cambridgeshire. I mean, a lot of people say that there's other attractive parts of the country. So for members to see something, you know, I don't want to be picking on the previous report we had, but when you look at the amount of data on that cycling part, it's amazing how it breaks down to 2% of children or whatever, you know, if you look at the data. So I'm sure our research department could actually put some effort into achieving something similar that says that, yeah, they're all going to West Sussex for whatever reason, you know. That may not be, obviously that may not be the case, but yeah, I think you get my point. So I'd like us to see something that we appreciate what HR are doing. I'd like us members to know about it and to see how, to what extent we're able to influence it either here or for the LGA or for whatever. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to add, Councillor Maguire, I chair the ADEPT East of England group, which is the Association of Directors of Environment, Planning and Transport, and involved in the same group nationally. And as Sue says, it's not peculiar to us. The issue is across, certainly across East of England and beyond. So I think the steps that Sue's outlined is probably getting ahead of the game in some respects, because I don't think everybody else is doing that. But I think your point is let's have a look and just compare, and we can provide that data, I'm sure.
I'd just like to add in there myself as well. Personally, I don't think it's actually really just other highways agencies that we're competing with right now. A lot of what I hear is the likes of Amazon and other kind of deliver 0-hour companies where they're able to compete in ways that we can't. So it's actually possibly looking broader than just within other highways authorities, but actually looking at what makes us a compelling recruitment and place to work. And we do have a lot of compelling reasons to come work for us over Amazon. So it's making sure that we are communicating those and managing to bring people on. Members, do I have any other questions, comments or debate on this item? No? Okay. I mean, personally, for my own part, I would like to say that I am excited about some of the measures brought forward here. The street lighting, dimming is obviously an area of concern, but there are also great areas of great possibility here in terms of the LED replacement program. Not only does that help us reduce costs, but it actually helps us with our carbon emissions and make sure that we hit net zero as soon as possible. The recycling part, as suggested by John Monslow, also is an incredibly exciting area to look at. While it is also saving money, it can also really help us with our climate ambitions. So while there are many challenges coming forwards with the economy and the energy crisis that we're currently under, what I'm really happy about here is that we're also seeing the opportunities in this and how we can use it to actually help us hit some of our other ambitions that we have as a council, rather than just looking at the negatives. That in some ways this is really pushing us in a positive area. The price of bitumen going up so high in some ways actually makes us, incentivizes us further to be recycling, which is something we should have been doing anyway, but it just helps us add to that cost criteria in the business case of being able to do it. So while I am deeply concerned, particularly by night lighting and energy requirements there, we do have areas of opportunity here, and I'm very grateful to officers for exploring those and seeing what we can be doing in a positive light as well as a negative light. But moving forwards, oh, sorry, Councillor Shaler, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Under normal circumstances, we would be spending more to save, and in the situation, you know, everybody knows that over the last few years, lighting technology has really advanced a lot, and so it's not only LEDs, it's solar. Responsive lighting in some places where the lights come on and off when you pass them, that sort of thing. But you know, just be known that we are thinking about this, but if we only had a little more money, we would save a hell of a lot more money going forward. Thank you.
I would also just like to add a very quick plea to our members on this side, if they're going to Conservative Party conference, to ask our new government if they would protect us and maybe help us with slightly more funding. I don't believe there is much fat to be trimmed in our county council as it currently is. But thank you very much. Oh, sorry, do I have there, Councillor G.
On that one, Chairman, I think you'll find we're not on their Christmas card list, so
well, I apologise for that.
Just
sorry,
very quickly coming back on the 4 options we've got there for the lighting. Presumably, is that going to come back for us for a decision, or will that be, or will officers have made a recommendation for the next meeting?
I believe that's coming back as a business case in December.
Okay,
so
fine,
lots more work to be done on all of that before we go forwards. If nobody has any other comments, though, the committee is asked to note the overview and context provided for the 2022-2028 business plan, note the initial estimates made for demand, inflation and other pressures, and note the overview and estimates made for the updated capital programme. Can I take that by affirmation again? I'm doing very well on that here. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Final item on the agenda, item 10, is the Finance and Monitoring Report. David Parcell will introduce this report. So over to David. Is David on Zoom? There we go.
Hello. Hopefully you can see me.
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Hi. The Finance and Monitoring Report for Place and Sustainability. I think it'll be relatively short, what I'll be saying, because there hasn't been a lot of change. We're actually got a revenue overspend or projected overspend of 526,000. The main change of this is down to street lighting energy. Inflation for street lighting previously is thought it's going to go up by 80%, and the budget was actually rebased, and additional £1,051,000 was added to the budget. Inflation now is expected to be 100%, so we've got this additional pressure of 236,000. That is probably the worst case, because this figure was based on before the kind of like the capping of energy figures, but that capping is not quite straightforward. So there is quite a lot of work going on at the moment to what the figure's going to be, but hopefully that figure will be slightly less than that. Probably not a lot more to say on the revenue side. On capital, we've got a kind of in-year forecast underspend, mainly down to a number of cycling schemes where construction's likely to begin in next financial year, 23-24, because there's obviously development work going on beforehand for that. So that's all I've got, unless anyone's got any questions.
Thank you very much, David. Members, do we have any comments or debate on this item? Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would have liked to have seen the thing that we normally get as part of this report, which is an update of the progress of the LHI schemes. And I wondered if that could be emailed around to the committee, because I think it is useful for us to be able to monitor where these things are, particularly when we're asked these questions by our parishes.
I believe, Councillor King, it was sent in the monthly service report, which should have been circulated to you. So that would be circulated to all members rather than being put within this report here.
Excellent. I missed that. My apologies. So that was in the service report, and it originated from?
From your group leader, I think.
I believe it was sent out by Lhi Process.
So that we have a monthly service update report that's circulated to all county councillors now. It was circulated to the members of H&T. We're now circulating it to all county councillors, and that update report includes an update on the provision of the LHIs regularly monthly, so that it replaces it coming to here as part of the finance report.
Okay. And how was that agreed? Because I must have missed, was that agreed at a meeting, or?
That was agreed internally. We believed that the service report that came to us would be very useful for other members to be able to get given status reports and updates on all of Highways projects. So in the interest of openness and transparency, we've now started broadcasting that more widely with all members, so as all members are updated, not just members of this committee or spokes.
And if I may, Chair, how was it agreed that it would no longer come to the committee, but as part of an email?
I think the idea was just to, sorry, over to Sue.
I think you're referring to the LHI report not coming rather than the service update report. So we were, because of the necessity or what we felt, we didn't bring it for a decision. What we thought we were achieving was giving more regular updates, and the contact between the LHI delivery team and the individual county councillors was making sure that that progress was reported regularly, rather than relying on the finance report coming here once a quarter and maybe missing some of those more detailed conversations that we felt was actually solving any of those issues or concerns that the county councillors had with the delivery of the programme.
I think that's has some benefit. I do think that perhaps there is an issue of transparency here, because the papers that will go to the committee are seen by everybody, including the people that we serve, members of the public, whereas this email just goes out to councillors, to all councillors. So I think it should really have been agreed in a more transparent way that this change would take place. And I think we do need to think about how we can perhaps circulate this more widely, so that, again, our constituents can see what's going on.
Councillor Dupre, do you want to come on?
I had thought that the intention had been to put the progress with the LHIs on the council's website, so that every member of the council and every member of the public could view it updated very regularly. That was my understanding.
Yes, I believe the main intent behind this was to increase circulation of that report, not to decrease circulation of that report, because LHIs are very key to so many of our residents. So therefore, I apologise if it looked the other way, but the intent is very much to increase the circulation of that and make sure that members of the public and members are very much kept informed very regularly on the progress of LHIs.
And I welcome that, Chair, and I'm not assigning any ulterior motive to you or to anybody else, but I think it would have been useful perhaps to have informed parish councils that this was going to be a change that was going to happen, because many parish councils, I do know, tune into these meetings, and I think it would be useful just to flag up that the information is now on the website.
We can take that away. Personally, I'm not sure I know many parish councils have been reading the finance monitoring report to get updates of LHIs, but I will take that away, that we do need to communicate with parishes to make sure that they are aware of the status of LHIs, and that is
I think that would be very helpful. Thank you, Chair. And the other question that I have is, I noticed that we still have a substantial number of vacancies, particularly in the project delivery team. And I wondered if we could be updated on how the recruitment of interim staff is going. Thank you.
We have got a number of interim staff within the project delivery team, and the major recruitment that I was referring to before is very heavily focused on project delivery. And our new Assistant Director, Mike Williams, for project delivery, has very much been leading that programme with the HR team to look at the flexibilities that we could have in our employment packages that we can offer, so that we can attract as many people as possible to those vacancies.
Through you, Chair, why are we still on 42.4%?
Because we've not done the recruitment process, we're about to start that.
I wanted to know, Chair. Thank you.
So at the moment, we have interim people in place covering the vacancies that we can, and the recruitment is about to start to get the permanent employees in.
So the 42.4% does not represent the vacancies, because I understood you to say, Sue, that we actually do have interim staff who are filling some of those vacancies. So these are the vacancies for the permanent staff. That is, again, a little bit misleading, because it looks absolutely dire, 42.4%.
I would say that in some service areas it is as dire as that. We have some particular areas of our services that aren't covered by interims where we do have that issue.
I suggest, Chair, that perhaps we have a look at how these figures are presented, because I think it is important for us to keep an eye on how our vacancies are going. And I don't think this represents a fully accurate picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. I'm happy for us in CVC and spokes to pick some of that up. Councillor Maguire.
Chairman, I'll try to be quick because I appreciate you want to get to lunch, but I want to take us back to lighting, and I'm going to be parochial and note that 6 members of this committee had their light above their head switched off recently. So I presume there's a third saving, whereas the rest of you seem to be benefiting from the light. Having said that, it doesn't adversely affect you. I can still see members across. Why don't we just switch the light off and have a bit of energy saving? Sorry.
I would say, Councillor Maguire, to me, you do look slightly in shade. You are a silhouette of your former self, but yes, energy saving in action right there. Thank you very much. Do I have any further comments? Councillor Sharp.
Just one very quick comment. And I'm afraid it is parochial. Looking at the capital report on 301, I noticed there's nothing there for the A1303 Swaffham Heath Crossroads project.
I'm happy to take that away and get back to you if possible on that one. Thank you. Do I have any further comments? Or should we wrap things up? Okay, so the committee's asked to note the contents of the report. comments? Anybody happy to take that by affirmation? Yes. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So the final item on today's agenda is the committee agenda plan and appointments. The Democratic Services Manager will take us to the agenda plan.
Nothing further to add to what's been published, Chair.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions on that? Councillor King.
I think you could have seen that, Chair. I'd like to request 2 items for consideration for inclusion in the action plan. One is a paper along the lines that Councillor Maguire requested, just trying to identify what other councils are doing to recruit and whether we could do more in highways and transport for the county. And the second item I'd like to request is that we look at the possibility of developing a similar paper to the one on cycling and walking, but for other non-motorized users.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. I am sorry, I'm going to draw your attention to the council procedure for this, which is to bring it through spokes. But it's Councillor Sharp next. So if you're happy to bring that via spokes, we can do it that way. Thank you.
I've got 2 points on the agenda plan. One is I'm on the CPE, which is coming next time. I'm presuming that paper will include some items around the I'll call it funding level playing field. Certainly would want to explore that. And the second point, which is not on here, but is, and I know we've touched on it in the LHI working group, is around the 40-mile-an-hour buffer zone, that the motion that Councillor Goldsack, which I think was universally supported, I forget when, is the intention to bring that as a separate item, similar to the way the 20-mile-an-hour working group is operating, or I'm just not sure, not clear how we're going to bring that forward.
Thank you very much. David, did you have any comments on the first one of that, David Allett?
Yeah, if the CPE paper will provide an update paper on where we're at, and that will provide an opportunity for this committee to raise issues about the financial arrangements. We will be bringing a paper early next year on the buffer zones. I think, practically speaking, we have a 20-mile-an-hour process, which is a process that can facilitate speed reductions, but we'll bring a specific paper to as agreed following the motion.
I believe as well, we obviously had the LHI program today, and those buffer zones would count as the quick wins, and so therefore would be looked to prioritise through that route as well. And I think that might well be the correct route for those. Do we have any further? Sorry, Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question about the Royston to Granter Park working group that met over several years until recently, and we talked about reconvening that group, but I haven't heard anything since. So can I ask if we can just clarify the situation with that? I mean, happy to take for officers to take it away.
Answer that one.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we'll take that away and reconvene the group. We are still awaiting confirmation of funding from the combined authority regarding the next stage, but as we discussed at the last committee, I think it would be helpful to get that group back up and running, so we'll get a meeting scheduled.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any comments or questions on the forward agenda plan? Okay, if not, we're being asked to note the agenda plan, which I believe we all have. And that concludes today's business. Thank you to those members of the press and public who have joined us in person. Thank you. It's been a very good debate. And thank you to everyone that's been watching the live stream. I now declare this meeting closed. Have a good lunch, everyone.